The Controller General of Customs, the Deputy Governor of Gombe State, former DCG of Customs retired, the sole administrator of Customs before, who is here present, captains of industries, leaders of various associations, management staff of Nigerian Customs Service. Permit me to limit my protocol to just this so that we can address the issues, bearing in mind we have just 2 hours to live here. Thank you very much, CGC, for this opportunity. I am going to leverage on my experience of having worked at the border stations, 2 of them, Idiroko and Seme, and having also interacted with people across the border who also engage in custom activities, talking about our proximate neighbors. And then having been one of those that participated in the port reforms from 2006 up till now, starting with concession of the port in Apapa and customs migrating to e-platforms. And now being the area control of Tinkana Land Command, I think I'm going to speak from experience. One of the first things we're going to do is that we're going to accept the fact that we must address issues as they are and tell ourselves the truth. Anytime you say what is not fact and it is used as policy, that policy, when formulated, will collapse. And that's part of the problems we have. When the opinions are expressed in the maritime industry, they are selfish, they are silo, and they don't address issues as it is. And I'm not saying this for just the freight forwarders alone, it is for everybody. Government agencies deny when they owe the responsibility to the public, freight forwarders too, and importers in a bid to maximize profit. Also don't want to tell the government the truth so that policies will be tailored towards the national economy. So I'm going to mention some of those things. Number 1, cargo integrity is very poor. Importers, agents don't make correct declarations, and it is affecting the nation, even in terms of our trade data, because we are discussing data here. So when you request for export document from foreign, and you want to compare with import document as declared in Nigeria, there are inconsistencies, and it's affecting us, it affects revenue, and it affects decision making. Number two, I don't want to mention specifically what it's all about, issues of concealment, undervaluation, transfer of value, some language, vocabulary that never existed or shouldn't be existing in the vocabulary of this system. We have introduced them, new to old, all those language we do. Now, the issue of scanning, which is a global trend for trade facilitation, we request that scanners should be provided verbally in our communication. But practically, 90% of us don't want to use scanners. And that is because cargo integrity is compromised. We have this erroneous belief that the moment a container is scanned, what is found inside the container, being inconsistent with declarations, that container will have problem. And this is where the delays arise. So we have terminal operators who don't have the space, particularly post-concession agreement. The spaces that were in the port are now being used to domicile containers. So we have limited spaces. There is a particular terminal. The space for daily container declaration is 230 containers a day. And this is a terminal where vessels come and drop like 3,000 containers a day. So how do you now examine 230 containers when every day vessels are dropping containers? Now we recommended that those containers should be sent to scanning. Freight forwarders and agents resist it most of the time. And so we have issues of rerouting. People deliberately misinform the system so that their cargo will be sent to another terminal where the container is not domiciled. And when they now have opportunity of changing that terminal to where the container is, they determine who examined that container, and of course the system will not accept scanning. So, sir, I would recommend that the ACG ICT should look into that to see. The Minister of Blue Economy once touted it. Inside the same hall, when I represented customs with my colleagues, on how to reform the system, that if it could be possible, let us scan every container that comes into Nigeria. That's the global practice all over. Why are we resisting it? That's number one. Coming to the terminal operators, we have issues of insufficient equipment and plants. But we understand how the economy is. We don't expect that under this present economy with the exchange rate, that you have enough resources to buy all the equipment you have. But with good planning, we can achieve so much. And we've tried to experiment that in Tinkan. What did we do? If you have cargo that is homogeneous, take for instance plaster of Paris. If you have 300 containers of plaster of Paris, which is possible on 3 buildings, how do you expect that agent to examine those containers if you must drop all at the same time? What we recommend is that if the CIU, the terminal DC, and then the DC enforcement and DC revenue can randomly select out of maybe a building carrying 50 containers of homogeneous cargo, select like 2 or 3 or 5, each of you, maybe you select like 15. If we examine them and there are no infractions, we release the rest to ease the system. Alternatively, let the agent admit that those containers should go to scanning so that we scan them and they all go at once. If we don't do that, what do you expect? Out of the 100 containers, the terminal can only drop like 10 or 15 for you in a day. And the customer side will tell you, I'm not going to release 15 until I see the remaining ones examined. That way, it can take like 2 weeks to examine those 100 containers. That means we have to wait for 2 weeks before those containers will go. And then consider if those things are raw materials. The factory will shut down for that period. So we should be proactive in some of our decisions in attending to this. Then we also say that come to work on Saturdays and Sundays and do away with the Owambe mentality of every weekend being the period for us to shut down the port. We are shutting down a port where shipside activities are going on daily basis. In the night, in the daytime, weekend, Saturday, Sunday, we are discharging cargo from the vessels. Yet, on Saturday and Sunday, we shut down the ports and go home, only for us to come back on Monday morning and meet congestion in the ports. So I want to suggest that if all of us will agree that we are going to optimize weekend operations, it's going to help us. Then working hours. Ports don't sleep. When they're sleeping in Nigerian ports, the ports in China, in Europe, and America are working. So why should we come to work by 8 a.m., which sometimes, based on what has been read out earlier by the CGC, people come to work sometimes by 10. Free for others, sometimes we tell you, officers won't come to work, therefore let us sleep at home. Rather than coming to show examples so that officers will use them to come, they also stay at home. Officers will tell you, oh, if I come early, free for others won't come early, let me stay at home. So both sides decide not to come early. You come to work by 10 o'clock, you do all the other formalities of settling down inside your office, and by 4 o'clock, you are going home. Meanwhile, shipside operation is going on 24 hours. These are some of the things causing problems for us. We need to agree to work 24 hours. And how do we work 24 hours? The enabling environment needs to be provided. MPA and other port landlords need to provide security. They need to provide lighting so that the port corridor will be secured for people to take delivery of their cargo in 24 hours. Thank you very much. But in doing this, we also need to get the road decongested. In 2017-2019, I particularly wrote a memo recommending to management of Nigerian Customs that we have to go back to barging operations. Now, that barging operation helped to ease the traffic along the port corridor. Unfortunately, rather than be seen as a regulatory function, barging has been turned into a revenue function. So now you see people paying as much as 450,000 naira, 500,000 naira to barge cargo, when that process should have been eased to move cargo out of the port through the waterways. It is now a commercial process where everybody is feasting to make money. So CGC, sir, I would recommend that you liaise with the Minister of Blue Economy to make sure that barging becomes a regulatory process rather than a revenue-yielding process for Nigerian Ports Authority and other people. Then let me also address the issue of shipping lines. We've had cases where some shipping lines use Togo as their hub. You badge your big vessel in Togo, and then you use smaller vessels to evacuate containers to Lagos. When these containers are being evacuated from Togo, I'm using Togo as an example. When another vessel comes to the batching space in Togo, you kick out the vessel coming to Nigeria. Because that vessel is going to carry 700 containers, you probably have loaded like 300 or 400. And you have given advanced information, manifest information to a particular terminal that I am going to batch this vessel in your terminal. But because you kicked it out impromptu, you take the vessel to Nigeria. And because the batching space that has already been created for you is on a particular hour and time, by the time you arrive in Nigeria, there's no space for you. What do? You choose any batching space you see in any of the terminals, and you discharge your cargo there. Meanwhile, freight forwarders has already agreed that my cargo is going to be dropped in Terminal A. You now go to Terminal A, B, C, D, and drop those containers, causing confusion everywhere. What do I get in the port? Rerouting. Agents come and tell you, I was thought my container would be in Terminal A, but the shipping line dropped it in Terminal C. Therefore, I want to change because I've already captured in Terminal A. Now, such confusions constitute delays in trade because by the time it takes the CAC to process that your application, to go to DC Revenue, to go to TS, to effect the release, there are almost 3 days gone. And I think the shipping lines who are here should address that issue. I've held a meeting with one of them to address it. Unfortunately, a second shipping line joined in the jamboree again, causing even greater confusion. That one is the latest one in the seaport. So I will suggest that the CGC hold a meeting with all shipping lines in order to address this particular issue, which not only have implications for revenue laws, but also implications for national security. Because containers are already being targeted, may be dropped at areas where we don't expect them anymore, and then it will become an issue. Again, let me tell terminal operators, when your vessel arrives and you are discharging the cargo, allow the freight forwarders to capture their cargo. Don't tell them to wait until the last box is dropped. Let me state this. If a vessel brings in 1,000 containers and I want to capture my cargo, why not allow me? You wait until the 1,000 containers, which may take 3 days, is dropped before agents are not allowed to go and start capturing their cargo. That is wrong. That negates the idea of 48 hours cargo clearance in the ports. Having said all this, CGC, sir, I think living here, we should encourage freight forwarders to use scanning, sir. It is very important we do that. If we don't do that, our port will remain the way they are. Again, I will encourage the use of badge without making badge a commercial process. The idea of writing that memo when I did it was for us to ease traffic on the road, not for us to turn it into commercial and revenue-making process for a particular government agency. Sir, there are other things that my colleagues that may also want to say, but before I say that, let me say somebody just sent in a question. Said, okay, thank you very much, CGC, sir. Thanks for the opportunity, sir. So I will wait to hear response from you people. If there's anything you want us to address, I will address them. And if there are areas that does not concern the ones I've said, my colleagues here from other commands in Lagos will say it. But let me also say that we have taken note of what the people from export said. What has suggested about export is that why is it that when export containers are loaded from wherever, having been stuffed outside, for which all of us witnessed, how come when the same container gets to the port, we start the documentation process all over again? I've had reason to intervene in one of the places. That is very wrong. We did outside stuffing. We collected data. Can that data be transmitted electronically to that person who will receive it, including the vehicle number and details of that container and the contents? Instead, when you come to TICT gate, for instance, at Shire gate, you see trucks line up. Trucks will line up in several kilometers, waiting to enter the port with export.
And when I went to ask question, they told me that collecting data from the driver and the driver doesn't know anything about that content. How do you expect a driver to be the one that will tell you something about a particular export? So I expect that we should address that too. Thank you very much, CGC.